Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Greg Veltri. I'm a technical application specialist with the Novo software, and I want to thank you for all attending this webinar series. We have another one next week on Tuesday, which will be on high dimensional analysis. But today we're going to be talking about proliferation with FCS Express. Today on the call with me, I have Andre, my colleague, and he'll answer any questions that you put into the question box there. So feel free to ask anything as we go along. And then I'll also try to answer any questions to give you examples of something. So let's get started. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about a little bit of background about cell proliferation. Then we're going to get into FCS Express on how to model cell proliferation, how to retrieve statistics, how to format the proliferation plots, and then we'll try maybe to do a little bit of batch analysis with that too. Okay. So let's talk about proliferation. All right. So what you usually do is, in this example, we have some PBMC cells, and we take those PBMC cells and we stain those. So for today's example, we're going to use cell trace violet. There are a bunch of different dyes out there by different manufacturers, but what I'm going to talk about is all the same principle. Once you stain your cells, usually you stimulate those cells, and that stimulation will give you that purple color. Now, what I have on the side here is the amount of proliferation on the chart of cell trace violet. So that amount of proliferation dye is corresponding to your cytometer in the mean fluorescent intensity. So the higher you go, the more dye you have. Now, what that means to us is that the first generation, which is what we place into cell culture, is going to be the brightest population, right? Because that has the most dye in it. And you'll notice on the far left, there is a white peak there, and that peak is our negative, all right? So you have your complete positive and you have your complete negative here. And then as it divides, it goes into the second generation, it's going to lose a little dye because it's been spreading that full dye into multiple cells now. And then you go into your third generation, and then the intensity is going to come down. And in your fourth generation, and then your dye is going to be even dimmer. Okay, so that's the principle about this, is that what we're looking at is we have a negative control, an unstained. We have a positive control that's fully stained, and then we have multiple populations from the different generations that have occurred. Now, the reality is it's going to look more like this because there's a distribution of the populations that occur. And you hope that most of your cells have divided so you don't really have a negative showing, but you have that. And then you have the different peaks here, and then you can then determine what's going on. And then what you'll do is you can place different other antibody fluorochromes on there, and we'll talk a little bit about our example in a moment. So that brings me to experimental setup. So we have controls. So things to think about is that you have a control of your proliferation dye. So in this case, cell trace violet. We've done a cell trace violet stimulation control, which means that we know we're going to get division. And then we have an unstained, and then our sample, which is the cell trace violet stimulated and unstained. Now, just kind of a little thing to throw out there is to remember that when you run this on your cytometer, you should save your instrument settings, save your layout or your worksheet or your document that has all of your plots and your gating on there. So as you look at this over multiple days, or if you look at this at multiple time points, you have the same settings, so you're starting from the same point, so things aren't moving all over the place. Okay. All right. So let's do a proliferation analysis. So before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about what I'm not going to do. So this is strictly on proliferation. I'm not going to really get into all the different features within FCS Express. It's not kind of a getting started thing where I'm going to show you all these different things of how to do multiple plots and stuff. I'm going to do that, but I just want you to know that we do have resources for that on our website that go through getting started with FCS Express and how to do all these things. I'm strictly just going to stick with proliferation analysis. Okay, so what I have here is a blank template, and give me one moment. Okay, and on this blank template, the first thing we want to do is we want to bring in some data. All right, so let's go to our data tab and data list, and I'm just going to take this and I'm going to anchor it over here. And I'm going to go and get some data here. So let's go to desktop. All right. And I have all of these, and I'm going to open those. And here's my data. Okay. And I could have dragged those in there too. There's different ways I can place the data there. Now, let's start off with the first one here. I'm going to select this. I'm going to drag it right here. I'm going to create a density plot. I'm going to click OK. All right, and in this plot, I can see all the different populations as they go through each iteration. So we'll start here. And let me just resize this a little bit so that we can fit additional plots on here. So I have a forward scatter, side scatter plot. Let's get on our cells of interest, which are these right here. And then I can create a name for that. So let's call that cells. And we'll click OK. And I'm going to click and drag, and that will create another plot for me. Now on this staining, what I have here is CD4, cytox, and cell trace. Cytox is a live dead determination, and then CD4 is actually a T cell if you're not familiar with it. And then cell trace is going to be our proliferation. So let's do a cytox first, right? And what we're doing is these are our live cells here. So we can create a very simple rectangle gate on that. And then we call these live. Now, if I want to, I can also, as I'm doing this, let's just so that we can see our gate list and our hierarchy and what's going on. So we'll put that right there. So now let's take this gate and let's do our CD4. Okay. So this is common for, I think, a lot of immunologists out there. You know, you got your cells, then I've got a live dead, and then I'm going to look at a particular cell type. In this case, it's CD4. So let's get on our CD4 cells. All right, so we'll call that CD4 positive. All right. And then let's make another plot here. Now, I'm going to change this plot into a histogram, and I can do that easily just by going to Format. I go to Plot Change, and I make that a histogram. And then I'm going to change this now to my cell trace violet. Right. And I can see right now, we'll pull this out a little bit like that, that I got multiple peaks here, all right? And this is my proliferation dye. So we can start to see that we have a staining here. And now this was on, if we pull this over, you can see the file name. This is my cell trace violet stimulated control. If we go to our cell trace violet control, which is basically just the cell trace there with some CD4 cells. It's like that. We see that it's right there, right? And then if we go to the stimulated control and then our unstained control. All right, so we've got the beginning. Now we can use the tools within FCS Express to get our proliferation. Okay. So let's create a proliferation plot. So let's do insert. And you'll see up here we have it says fit. You have DNA. We talked about that last week in our webinar series. And then I could do proliferation. And then I'll click here. So someone asked me, what was used for cell trace violet control cells? These were cells. We took cells and we stained it just with that. I don't know of any beads for it, but I think their thermo may have something like that. But we use this particular example of cells. Okay. Now you'll see that this is no gate. So I can do a couple of things. I can drag this on here, the CD4 on here, but I'll show you another way in that I can select here and I can say this is on CD4. And then the next thing I need to do is I got to pick the fluorochrome that we're working with, right? And there's my cell trace. So you see here, this is my unstained, right? And it's sitting in the same place. And if we go to the second file, we can start to see all the different iterations there that are different populations that have occurred from this. Now, this model is automatically happening. There's nothing for you to do that way. It just will have all of those peaks there for you. And I'm going to show you in a moment how we can change some of the formats on here, how we can establish our unstained point, and we can establish our control point of our first generation. But before I do that, let's bring in some statistics, right? So if I right click on this, you'll see that it says statistics, and then we get histogram statistics, but we want this proliferation fit statistics and proliferation population statistics. So let's select proliferation statistics. All right. And let's put that right over here. And you'll see it gives you a division index, a proliferation index, the percent divided, the peak ratio, the number of fitted cells, gives you the R-chi-square, start generating mean, background noise. So everything that you're going to need for your proliferation discussions and information about that, it all sits here. And if you want further information about each of these ones, we have this on our website also that goes through each one of these, or you can contact it as support@denovosoftware.com, and I'll have this at the end of the talk where to send questions in the email, and we can point you to that direction. Okay. Now the other statistic is proliferation population statistics. Now the proliferation population statistics gives us each of the generations, the undivided cells. It tells us the peak value, the peak channel, the log deviation, etc. If I click on this, you'll see that I have others. I could do the generation number. I can also select on here the number of origin cells, the percentage of that, etc. And I'll show you how we can export that in a bit too. So let's move that over there. All right, so now that we have some statistics, let's do some things about positioning our markers and where things are and how this is all working together. So if I right click on this and I do format, okay, I get a format window right here. And you'll see in the pull down menu, I have proliferation fit. I have position markers, and these two are going to work with the most, right? So let's start with the position markers. Okay. And let's select a control. So let's go to number 1. Right? And we have undivided cell peaks and we have background. Now what this does is allows you to see, to establish a marker so that you can have a standing point of where things began and where things did not begin, right? So my background, if I select this show position, which is green, you'll see that it kind of sits all the way over there. I can change the color if I want to. I can increase the size of it. And I could do the same thing with the undivided. Let's change that to maybe purple. And I can change the width of that. And let me just, if I move this so you can see, and it sits right here, right? So I have my position marker for my undivided cells and my background sitting right here. Now, if I go to proliferation fit, I can then go through each of these and I'm going to show you what we can do, all right? So let's go through what each one of these kind of mean. So the maximum number of peaks sets a limit for the number of divisions to analyze. It's always set at 10. Based on the way cells divide and the amount of dye that you have, you probably won't see more than 8. So we keep it at 10 because that will just cover everything and get everything that we need in there. Now, the maximum peak threshold, excuse me, we'll talk about in a moment. Used fixed CV. So that sets a fixed CV that will be used for every peak, and manually entering a value, you'll use the entered value. So you can fix this for each one of these, or you can have it open up in how you want it. The model is designed for you to have as much flexibility as you want, or you can have the same CV for all your peaks here. Okay. Now doing that, when a CV is determined by the software, the same CV will be applied to all the peaks. So we're going to keep that there. Used fixed peak ratio. Okay. That's a peak ratio is determined by the software. A value of 0.5 or half describes peaks that are half as bright as the last. So that's what we would expect to see. That's normally what you see. And manually entering a value will override the software, and you should really know what that value should be. So if you've determined that you have a fast growing or something that is larger than normal that may change that kind of ratio, then place that in there. I would look to maybe some data that's been placed out there in different journals and see if that needed to be changed. Okay. Same peak ratio for all the peaks. So if I select that, you'll see how that moves. Okay. And then using the fixed starting generation and using the background noise. Okay, so this is what we're going to work with now. So that's a matter of saying, where do we place these bars that we've placed here, right? So we're going to use our histograms, and I'm going to show you how we do that. And I'm going to move this over to the side here. And we do this, move that over here. Okay. Now I'm going to right click and duplicate this. I'm going to put that there. And what I'm going to do is place this plot as the control. Now it's going to say replace the existing overlay on the plot or add file. So I don't want to overlay, I'm going to replace it. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing down over here. And that moved on me. So another easy way to do this is just to go like that. Now, what I'm trying to do is I want to use these as controls. These are going to give me the mean fluorescent information on those controls. So I can work with this plot and be able to go through each of these iterations, right? So what I can do is I can select this plot, and I can go to the format here and go to overlays. And there's a selection here that says change data file during next and batch, previous batch. So I'm going to deselect that. All right. And what that means is that is now going to stay stationary as I go through everything. And I'm going to do that for the next one also. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place markers on here so I can get that statistical information that I want. So I'll go to gating, and I'm going to select a marker, and I'm going to place a marker right there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So now I have my two controls. Notice that it says M1, M1, but they're very specific to those plots. Our markers are not set up to be gates in the beginning. What they're set up to be is just a marker, because if I do multiple markers, I'd have a lot of gates, right? So they can be turned into gates, and we have talks about that, but for today, we're just going to keep them as markers. All right. Now, I am going to go back to this plot, and I'm going to go to where we were, which was the proliferation fit. So I have a value here that was selected from the data that I was looking at. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to this T. Now this T is a token area. All right, and tokens are basically information. So if I select on that, I have choices of different types of information that I can place into there. So I'm going to select statistic. The statistic that I want is going to be based on this plot here. Okay, so I'm sorry, yeah, and I'm going to go to the histogram. So it's not that one, right? Because that's my negative. What I want is this plot right here. And then I'm going to go to the stat there, and I'm going to select M1. And what I want is the median. Now, some people can use geometric mean, arithmetic mean. That's up to you. I feel like the median is going to work well for me. Okay, so I'll click OK. And now you'll see that what it's doing is using the cell trace violet. It's using this plot, and it's using M1, and it's going to give me that value right there. And if I select that, and then if I go now to use my background noise, I'll do the same thing. And I just noticed I made a mistake, so that's easy. We can fix that. We just select this, and I picked the wrong histogram. Go to the median. And let's change this. And do the same thing. And we're going to pick M1, median, click OK. All right, so there is that. And it looks like I messed up. Let me do it one more time. My apologies. All right, our statistic, M1, median, click OK. There's that. Now let's do our background, our statistic, insert, 1, 1, and go to our median, click OK, and then that's there too. It's not a valid number. Okay, so I've made a mistake somewhere, but this is how we would do it. Now, the next thing that I would do is I want to export all of this information, right? So what I would now do is I can batch this. So if I go to our batching and I go to batch actions, I can now easily drag information into here to create this. So I can, let's do save as a PowerPoint. So I want to include the background. I'm going to have it open after saving it. I could do all the pages. So if I had multiple tabs here, or I can select a certain one. I'm going to combine all the outputs from all the iterations into the same presentation, but I could separate them if I wanted to. I don't have anything I'm going to append, but I am going to save it to my proliferation folder. And we'll name it. Do save. Click OK. So now we have that there. And the next thing I want is statistics on this, right? So I'm going to export Excel column mode. I'm going to say where I want to put it. So let's place it into same folder. This will be Excel proliferation. And we're going to do save. We'll click OK. And now we can put in our stats that we want here. So what I would probably want is percentage of all my cells. I'm going to grab this and drag that in there. So I got that. Or what I could also do is I can drag the plot in here instead. So let's drag the plot. And I have my statistic token. So I want my cells. I want my file name. I want the number of cells. All right, and all I'm doing is hitting control as I do that. And then I have a bunch of other statistics. If I want, I can do that too. I'm going to click OK. Now, the other thing I want in here is all the work that I just did is my proliferation statistics. So I can grab this and drag it right onto there. Oh, I didn't grab it correctly, so let's move this over here. Need a little bit more room, so let's do this. There we go. And I'll put that there. So now I have all of that information there. And then I can also, if I want to, is click on this and I can drag all this information into there too. And I can have the generation numbers and things like that that I want. And I'm just going to say OK for now. Correct it, sorry. I want generation 1, generation number. I'll just do this so you can see. All right. Now, the other thing that I want to do is just to get this ready, I'm going to close this so we can see some things, is I'm going to format this to get ready for how I want my data to be presented. So if I select on this and I go to overlays, what I'm going to see in overlays is I have up here, and let's pull this down, is I have all the different populations and each of those peaks there. Now I can change this format to make it a little bit more presentable for publication. So let me select generation 1 through generation 9 to show you an example. And let me scroll down over here. And you'll see it says fill the histogram area, and I can change this to a color. Right? And I can then make a transparency of this so that we can see. So usually like 50 is probably a good number. Right? And now I have each of the colors, and I can change each one of those, right? I can go to generation 1 and I can make that into a different color. etc. So let's do that. So we have this nice color thing, we have that, and now we can go to our batching and we can run that batch. And what you'll see, it's going to export it to PowerPoint. It's going to go through each one of these. Now, let me pull up the data so that you can see the data list. Now, I started here, so I only am going to have 2. If I had started at 1, you'll have all 4 on here, okay? Now, here is my data in my PowerPoint, all right? So this is PowerPoint. If we zoom in on it, we have the information. We can also ungroup these and we can add different information. So if we don't want to say cell violet H, so we'll go to group, ungroup this, and I can get rid of that H, or I can say this is my proliferation dye. I don't want to say what I'm using, etc. And then on my Excel, it exports all the statistics, the generations that I picked from that, the unstained and the 2. So we only did 2 samples on our batch, but it has all that information there for us to look at. Okay. So that's basically, that's the principle of doing proliferation in FCS Express, right? So it's going to go through each one of these. So these are the 2 that we're really concerned at, right? Now, one last thing before I kind of finish up. If for some reason the populations change on you and you need to kind of gate on this differently, just remember you can always do a data specific gate by selecting the gate. And then if you hit data specific gate, we can move this over here. And then as we go, you'll see that it'll go back to where it was. All right. Okay, so that brings us basically to the end of our talk. What I hope you got out of this was that you know, the proliferation plots are inserted, they're formatted, they're used like any other plot in FCS Express. So if you've used FCS Express, you'll see that I really didn't do anything different. The tool is very easy to use. The modeling is done automatically for you. As long as you have the proper controls, it makes it very easy to do. Specific formatting options allow you to change the parameters as needed, but it's pretty much set to where you need it to be. We have a tutorial online that covers the basics for this, and it goes through the formatting, the batch processing of doing this. There's also a manual that describes the proliferation model in detail. It explains the fit parameters, describes the mathematics used to calculate the statistics and fits, and then any of these proliferation tokens. We have a question. What does it mean if R chi-squared value is higher than 5, and how to correct it? You know, I'm going to say that's a very good question. You know, if it's larger than 5, it depends. You know, I've like in cell cycle analysis, if you have certain types of cells, so let's say CHO cells or things like that, where you get a weird type of proliferation or cell cycle, your R-chi is going to be different. So I can't really answer how to correct that. It depends on the experimental work that you do. I'm sorry. But if you have any other questions, feel free to write them in here. We'll stay on for a little bit. I know we've kind of ended a little early, but also if something comes to you later on or you just want to ask questions about other things, we have support@denovosoftware.com. And we try to get to questions within 2 hours or 24 hours, but no more than 24 hours to answer your questions. So again, thank you for coming to this and contacting and watching this. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know.